Estero Today, produced by Engage Estero. I'm Mike Wasson, your host. Traffic in Estero seems to have lightened up now that we're past the seasonal rush of visitors. But one evening this past week while I was out traveling, I noticed that I-75 going northbound during an evening rush hour was still plenty busy. It was still backed up and very slow. And traffic also today can be slow going southbound in the morning as the people go to Naples to the work, and in the evenings when they return to their homes in Cape Coral or up in Lehigh Acres. And an accident on one of these major north-south roads is going to always cause problems and backups, sometimes in Estero on Ben Hill Griffin and also Three Oaks Parkway. In an attempt to break this large logjam, the Florida Department of Transportation, in consultation with Lee County and Collier County transportation departments, have come up with a solution. Their plan is to increase the number of lanes from 6 lanes to 10 lanes on Interstate 75. That will be between Corkscrew Road and Immokalee Road, and from 6 lanes to 8 lanes between Immokalee Road and Golden Gate. Mhm. Further, I suppose that this stretch, this hourglass, if you will, big traffic moving down to the traffic, that little stretch hourglass, they will widen that highway to get more traffic through at the rush hour part of the day. Nicole Harris, FDOT, that's Florida Department of Transportation Southeast or Southwest Connect, is the project manager for that area and said, and I quote her, the project development and environment study for the segment is still underway and on track for completion of the study in January of 2026. As part of this phase, a traffic noise study is being conducted to evaluate current and future noise levels for communities along this corridor. She continues, we're finalizing key design elements such as traffic projections, drainage, and lane configurations that feed into the noise analysis. These are all considerations. Once this is complete, the study will determine whether noise barriers are warranted, feasible, and reasonable under FDOT and Florida Highway state guidelines. Joining me to talk about this development is the president of Engage Estero, Allan Bowditch. Allan, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
You have been talking to various members of the community in the last few days and just completed an article for Engage Estero's website.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll provide a link to viewers at the end of this podcast so you can go to that website. But Allan, what is the initial reaction that you're seeing from some of the community to this announcement?
Well, thank you, Mike, and hello, everyone. During the last couple of months, we've actually had a number of meetings that we've held, which has looked at safety and also the results of the traffic investigation that was carried out by the village of Estero. And during those meetings, there was a lot of feedback from the residents on all of these issues. But those people that had heard about the expansion of I-75 at those meetings did express some concerns about the potential for increased noise. One of the people that I spoke to initially, who had been at those meetings, who I regard as a good friend, but also an expert on traffic issues, was Carmen Monroy, who is indeed a senior person at CTS Engineering. One of the interesting things she said was that as she'd actually been someone who had worked at FDOT in the earlier part of her career, I guess that she knows quite well how things are handled. And she told me that they do respond very much to public opinion when that's communicated to FDOT about any concerns that they may have. But initially, she mentioned to me, Mike, that I should also speak to Don Scott. Don, in fact, is the director of Lee Metropolitan Planning Office. and has been very, very responsive both to me and Engage Estero and to many other people. And when I contacted him about this development, in fact, he mentioned to me that he'd already spoken to a number of residents here in Estero that had been in touch with him, but he also impressed upon me something which I was unaware of until fairly recently, and that was, as you mentioned, that the section of road between Corkscrew and Immokalee wasn't only going to be 8 lanes in total, but 10 lanes. And it appears that in this stretch, there will be 2 express lanes in addition to the 3 lanes that there are at the moment. So, in some ways, because many of the public are equally unaware of the fact that there will be 10 lanes now, not 8, I think this may enhance their concern rather than diminish it. So, those are some interesting points. And of course, I'm sure we'll come on to one or two other issues in just a moment.
What communities along Interstate 75 are impacted the most by these changes?
Well, there are a number. Those that I actually discovered would be affected perhaps the most include Stony Brook, Woodland, Tidewater Village, Villa Palmeras, Shadowwood, Copperleaf, Lighthouse Bay, and Pebble Point. But there is something additional that I wanted to mention. Um, some discussions that I've had with one of our village directors, David Willems, mentioned to me that he was surprised that the road widening hadn't in fact included the section between Alico Road and Corkscrew Road. And although I'm unaware at the moment that there would be any immediate plans to include that section in this development, which is my understanding would be completed by maybe around, oh, it's going to be started in our section in 2029, even though, as you rightly said, Mike, that issues of communication about concerns have to be in by the end of this year. So I think that the development will probably not be completed entirely until maybe into the early 2030s. But be that as it may, there may be a reconsideration of incorporating the section between Alico Road and Corkscrew Road, perhaps into some future plans and maybe even into this particular timeline. But I'm unsure of that at this moment. But if that were to happen, then actually that would include a number of other potential communities in Estero.
Sure. You in the statement they released, there's going to be some traffic noise studies done. Uh, does higher speed and more lanes, how does that affect noise levels along expressways?
Well, that's something that we have looked into, and there are quite a number of studies that have been done internationally on increasing highway sizes and number of lanes that indeed have been proven to show that increased speed, and particularly those trucks that run on those highways, particularly, are the ones that can help to improve or increase rather the noise levels. In fact, when the speed is actually increased by 10 miles an hour, um, that actually can actually quadruple the impact of noise. Of course, it doesn't mean that the decibel noise is quadrupled, but nevertheless, the audience, the people in the area will recognize that increase when they hear it.
Alan, we have experienced a lot of population growth around Estero, and there are still some plans in the works for the East Corkscrew
Mhm.
area to more development. Do you think FDOT is taking into consideration the population growth?
Well, I mean, I hope so. I mean, when FDOT do embark upon, as you rightly said, their own investigation to look at how this expansion may impact people's quality of life because of the increased noise, um, it's always a question when you carry out modeling investigations as to what inputs there are that will come up with the correct response. And what you say is true that, there are, of course, very many new developments that are planned for East Corkscrew. There is the big Kingston development, which, while not started yet, could increase the number of um, residents itself by around 20,000. And then there's FDDF Farms, which would also increase it by about another 10,000. So that would be 30,000. And that doesn't include the recent announcement by Collier County, who are also looking at putting in further developments. While not exactly in Estero, it could impact that Jess Broad area. So all of those factors definitely need to be incorporated, and perhaps that's what triggered David Williams's comments that we ought to really be looking also at the road widening between Alico and Corkscrew Road.
Do you think there's any consideration, or maybe you've studied consideration on the type of noise barriers that are best? I mean, I've seen concrete, I think trees and landscaping and berms. What seems to be the strengths and weaknesses of all those various noise, the types of noise barriers?
Well, that's of course a very good question. In fact, I happened to chair a committee within Shadowwood a number of years ago that did actually look into the whole issue of noise abatement from the noise coming from Three Oaks Road as that was being expanded. So we have a very good understanding of issues like what walls might have as a potential benefit. The problem with walls, although they are something that are used a lot on highways, is that the uh, opportunity to affect the way in which noise is transmitted, unfortunately, only has a relatively small range. In fact, I would describe it probably as only benefiting those who live within maybe about 1.5 football field lengths. That's US football field lengths. Um, so about maybe up to about 500 feet. And of course, as one might imagine, the sound can overcome the wall and come down further along. So people further along the period that the wall might protect can obviously experience quite a lot of noise. And equally, of course, when it's windy, which it often is in the area, that can carry the noise much further. We obviously looked at berms, and while berms do have a particularly beneficial effect, the vegetation thickness needs to be high. The type of height needs to be around 20 feet at its maximum. And because in order to make that berm appropriate, of course, it has to cover a wider range. Now, when all of that's taken into account, the other problem is that, of course, high winds, and we do have those down here, can affect berms. So the maintenance on them is much higher. And I know that organizations like FDOT and others tend to shy away from them because of the much higher cost of maintenance. And indeed, also, it can harbor animals which could be a danger to traffic, depending on the size of those that may locate themselves in those kind of berms. So although they are very beneficial, they have disadvantages. Often what we've also seen, however, is that actually it benefits people to, use their own means of reducing noise by having fountains in their garden, double glazing, which I guess a lot of people now have, maybe triple glazing to protect against hurricanes and so forth. So all of those can help the individual people, but it is very difficult to get to a solution that is actually going to be beneficial to a very large number of people, unfortunately.
Well, it sounds like it's a complicated kind of project, and a lot of considerations need to go into this. I would encourage, and we'll again mention to you that Allan's article is on our website, and
Hmm.
we'll have a link to that at the end of this podcast. So, as part of the announcement, it was also mentioned that there's a meeting
Hmm.
planned in Naples on August 14th at the North Collier Regional Park. And
That's
I'll give
right.
you the address 15000 Livingston Road in Naples. That's August 14th. Uh, I assume that certainly one of the next things to do in this step of getting people involved is to attend that meeting. That would be important.
Absolutely
Are
important.
there
And if
other
I,
steps that the population can take if
well,
they're
yes,
interested in having their comments heard?
sure. Yeah, I mean, first of all, going back to the meeting, I mean, I would definitely recommend as many people as possible go and turn up because they will learn what's happening, but also be able to express their views. As Carmen Monroy had told me that that would be very well taken on board by FDOT. But in the article, we have laid out a number of steps that people should take. The first is that even in the article itself, there is a place at the end for you to write your name, email address, and your home address so that we can collectively get these and pass them en masse to the Florida Department of Transport. This will be much better and more convenient, I think, than perhaps piling individual emails onto Nicole, who has been very, very gracious in getting back to me, I would say, with a lot of the information about this. And indeed, in the back of the article, as an appendix, there is an article that she sent me about the process that they go through in this means of looking at noise and potential noise abatement. But the other thing is I would recommend is that we've sent a special communication to all of the HOAs and the gated communities that I mentioned a little earlier. And I'm hoping that the managers of those communities will send specific information to all of the people who live in those communities to respond to the manager. And then the manager can do a similar process to what I've described, collect all of those. And my suggestion, because again, I've spoken to just today um, the mayor of Estero, Joanne Ribble, who has agreed to take this matter on board, as will David Williams, because they recognize that as a community that appreciates the importance of the quality of life of our neighbors, that they will, on our behalf, also put forward their concerns to FDOT. So I'm advising that the heads of those communities send those emails as a group to Mayor Ribble, and she will communicate with David to get back to FDOT. So there is a process in place.
So we would hope also, if you do not live in the village of Estero, that there's other towns like it's going to affect Bonita Springs. You could send the information to their county, their board of directors or their village board, and to the unincorporated areas that are outside the village city limits. Send them to the
Correct.
county board
Yes,
of directors. Okay.
absolutely. And that information is also mentioned in the article. So it did get released by our webmaster and communicator, par excellence, Kim Daly. And so that was released today. So in fact, we have 13,000 people who receive these communications from us now. And perhaps those of you who have received it would also like to forward it to your friends and neighbors in case they have not actually got that as one of the 13,000, since we still have more people to communicate to in Estero. So that's what I would say.
Allan, there's plenty of opportunity to get involved and get engaged in the Estero, especially on this subject. So we thank you for your time today. Thanks for joining us, and
My
thanks for
pleasure.
all the work you've done to help inform. And that's what Engage Estero is all about: to gather information,
Sure.
to share that information with you, to inform you, so that you can be better engaged in impacting on keeping our community a nice place to live, work, and play. So thanks for joining us today. I would like to also mention to you that we will have a link to the article at the end of this podcast. I want to thank you for listening to Estero today. We hope that you found the information interesting and helpful. If you would like to comment on this webcast or this podcast, or if you have some information or suggestions for future podcasts, please email us at info@esterotoday.com. That's info, INFO, at esterotoday.com. Produced by Engage Estero. This is your host, Mike Wasson, saying thank you for joining us. We wish you a good week and hoping you can join us next week for more news from Estero Today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Pleasure. Thank you for coming.